Good morning. Today is Monday, the 12th of May. Today is Mother's Day. Sorry, no, it's not. Yesterday was Mother's Day. But honestly, every day should be Mother's Day because we should appreciate our mothers every day. Every day should be Mother's Day.
No, it was brought up, forgot the history of it, but it was brought up by a woman long time ago, passed, and eventually went from state to then national. Now it's a national holiday.
Yeah.
Which I think is great.
Today we are talking about conservatism.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. That was the first time that you responded like that. Yeah.
I don't know what we're talking about.
Yeah, we are talking about conservatism. And interestingly enough, 2CV. Very interesting. That's one of our Q&As today. So today, this
Second commandment violation.
Yes, sir. This Mother's Day Monday, we are talking about conservatism and 2CV. It's going to be a great episode. You are listening to the fastest growing podcast, the Dear Church podcast. Welcome to the Dear Church podcast, where we exist to fill your ears and your minds with the study of God to see the world as disciples of Christ. I have not messed up on that in years. So today, as we said in our introduction, we're going to be talking about conservatism and 2CV. I think, this topic came up, actually a couple different people reached out to me concerning this topic because in previous podcasts, we have used the term conservative and liberal pretty liberally. We talk about conservative ideals or circles. We talk about liberal agendas and liberal worldviews, but I thought perhaps we should take a step back, if you will, and look at these terms. What does it mean to be conservative? What does it mean to be liberal? Oftentimes people say that Christians are conservative. And as always, we would push back and say, no, we're biblical. But why even that association with Christians, right? And where does secular conservatism and biblical Christianity part ways? So that's kind of what we'll be discussing this morning. But but first and foremost, definitions. This is what I've looked up. This is why I get paid the big bucks. Conservatism. Huh?
That you do.
Thank you. Conservatism from Merriam-Webster means inclination to preserve what is established, belief in the value of established and traditional practices in politics and society, or a political philosophy based on tradition and social stability, stressing the importance of established hierarchies and institutions such as religion, the family, and class structure, and preferring gradual development to abrupt change. I think the second definition there already has some words that is designed to trigger some people, but let's head over the pond to Britannica. Conservatism, political doctrine that emphasizes the value of traditional institutions and practices, preference for the historically inherited rather than the abstract and ideal. And so, according to Britannica, it was a distinct political attitude, conservatism, and movement that developed in reaction to the French Revolution, and is a term that was introduced after 1815 by supporters of the Bourbon monarchy in France. And if you start looking through the history of conservatism, a name will continue to come up. It's Edmund Burke. He was a British parliamentarian and political writer, and he's the originator of the modern term conservatism, although he never used the term himself. And this is from Reflections on the Revolution in France.
He said he never used it, but he's the originator of it.
Not the term.
Where do you get this stuff?
Sorry, did I say the term? I meant not the term. The originator of modern articulated conservatism, although he never used the term himself.
Yes.
Is what I meant. What did I say?
You just got to read it.
But
can't make up your own stuff.
It's kind of boring, though.
Okay. But you said something completely different.
Maybe.
Brian will cut it out. Don't worry. He'll make you look good.
Thank you.
Yep.
And he wrote Reflections on the Revolution in France, which was a forceful expression of conservatives' rejection of the French Revolution and a major inspiration for counter-revolutionary theorists in the 19th century. For Burke and other pro-parliamentarian conservatives, the violent, untraditional, and uprooting methods of the revolution outweighed and corrupted its liberating ideals. The general revulsion against the violent course of the revolution provided conservatives with an opportunity to restore pre-revolutionary traditions, and several brands of conservative philosophy soon developed. As American writer Ambrose Bierce defined it, the conservative is a statesman who is enamored of existing evils, as distinguished from the liberal who wishes to replace them with others. I think that was pretty interesting. Mm-hmm. But, all of this to say that I think today there could be views that liberals are crazy people of anarchy that just want change, whereas conservatives are wealthy, racist bigots that want to sit back, relax, and let all the poor and immigrants suffer. And so there is this idea that conservatives are backwards. Why are we going back in time? We want to be on the right side of history. And these are very, very, very stereotypical views, but those are the extremes. So I guess with that in mind, and perhaps that kind of cultural picture in mind that I think we can see in the news, Christians, where do we land? Is it wrong for a Christian to be liberal? Is it wrong for a Christian to be conservative? Are there big differences between worldly conservatism versus Christianity? Let's start there.
Yeah, I mean, it's good that you went through it, so we could get there where you ask, but again, let's go to the context and let's dive into what you said. The political terms left and right were actually from the French Revolution. Mm-hmm. And so there's this great writer who helped the whole thought process going on through the American Revolution. His name was Thomas Paine.
Oh, yeah.
Wrote some brilliant stuff. And then he eventually went on to the French Revolution. So the American Revolution and the French Revolution were vastly different. But, some would say that they would try to take some of the underpinnings of the American Revolution, bring it to the French Revolution. But the French Revolution really morphed it into something where it became a very, very anti-religious. That's why we have all these priests and religious leaders killed during the French Revolution. But the political terms left and right came from the French Revolution. And it was during that economic and political upheaval in France where people started to define terms. So before the 1700s, before the 18th century, it really wasn't used like that. I mean, obviously people would be a little bit left, a little bit right on certain issues and whatnot, but the definitive separation of the groups they were really solidified then, and that now has been brought to the West. So if you look at the Orient, they don't really use left and right to describe a lot of things. Maybe South Korea, but not China, and not these other places where Confucianism is still very strong. And so maybe South Korea will still have a little left and right understanding because it's incredibly westernized. But left came to mean where egalitarian is really a left idea, because left came to mean anti-establishment, anti-hierarchical rule, right?
Yep.
So you didn't want the monarchy to rule over you. You didn't want these powers. So you wanted a leveling of social classes from say kings and the peasants. They're all equal in a sense. Mm-hmm. And so there's a leveling of that. And you don't necessarily disagree with that, right? Because you don't want the kings to think that they are worth more than you, right? Don't we have all equal dignity in God? And so there is this sort of leveling of social classes. But with social class leveling, there needs to be economic leveling. So you can't have someone incredibly more rich than you, because then that social leveling really is not there. So that's why you have all these leftists really thinking you need to have reform, and, hopefully it's democratic reform. This, again, is from the French Revolution, where you would have this equality take place between classes.
Yeah.
The right then were more understood as people who wanted to support and keep the monarchy, the aristocracy, and let's say, especially in France, the Catholic Church's influence, because the Catholic Church had a lot of influence in the Pope and all that stuff, and Pope in the news. I'm sure people understand. Pope has a lot of power. He's the leader of 1 billion people. That's a lot of power, right?
Leo the 13th,
and so you have all these things, and so the right would say, even though there would be reform, it needs to be gradual reform. And then the left would say, we need fast, hard reform because this is just outright evil. And that's where we would see these abuses of the left and right. Now, this is going from the 1700s. Abuses from the left and right, where the left would be commonly associated, the extreme left would be commonly associated with communism and socialism. And think Russia, and think China. And then the right would be commonly associated with fascism. That's why we have groups like anti-fascist groups. What are they called? The Antifa, right? Yeah. They're anti-fascists, meaning they are anti-right because they consider all people on the right to be essentially fascistic. And so that would be the Nazi regime. So they would be extremely right. And so you have these extremes that will be formed from the political left and right. Again, this is in the West, right? And so where we would have equality really come out because we don't want that separation of social classes, that means wealth equality has to be there, income equality has to be there. That's where we get the notion of egalitarian. Egalitarianism really, that word and phrase really is used from the political birth of the left and right in the French Revolution. And so egalitarian is really supported by not Christian roots. It's supported by secularism. And the fact that the church has now embraced egalitarianism using some biblical language without understanding that actually its roots are from secularism. That's why there's so much finagling has to be done by egalitarian Christians, because you can't say, oh, Paul just meant it for that time and place. But for our time, we need this, because doesn't, God say we are equal in dignity? Again, they'll use the left's rationale, like equal in dignity means equal in social status, equal in wealth, equal in income. And so equal in in all these things, and they'll use that race that everybody uses. We all should start from the same place. But now equity means we all end in the same place. And so there has been a lot of morphing of understanding. The right really wanted no regime change. They wanted to keep the monarchy. They wanted to keep the aristocracy, any kind of hierarchical structure, because they wanted order and stability. So that's what it meant. And then the right would say, well, the Catholic Church has been there forever, and that's why we want to continue to follow the Catholic Church. Again, this is why a lot of people are now going back to the Catholic Church, because they understand the political right to be the correct way. So if you understand politically that you are completely right, then you like the Catholic Church. You like its old roots, the order that it brings, the stability that it brings, because it's been there for 1,000 plus years. That's what the right would believe.
But it's interesting because, up until this last pope, he actually embraced a lot of leftist ideas.
I would think that conservative Catholics, meaning politically conservative Catholics, would push up against that, because he still was not for gay marriage. He supported the blessing of, not like you could bless people as they come up, but he wouldn't specifically bless the union itself. He would just bless the people. So you could come up with your partner to be blessed, but it would be blessing the union. And so they would, pick on that nuance, saying Pope Francis would still hold on to Catholic traditions of the past, but he would embrace maybe more of a loving way of doing it. So I think that's how the right, Catholic rights, really defend that position.
So I guess from the French Revolution to today, how do we get to today? And when we look at the political landscape of America today, like you said, the extremes are communism, socialism, and fascism. Where do we land as biblical Christians? Where do we land? And is there like a freedom kind of? Is there like a range where we can land? Or if you're a Bible believing Christian, you have to be here? Or is there kind of a broad range where we could be in?
Yeah, I think there is some sort of freedom and liberty that we have as Christians, especially when it comes to political circles. I think I want to dive deep into that. That's a fun topic to talk about. But continuing on from the 18th century, we should go to the 19th century. 19th century is where Karl Marx or Marxism was really introduced, and it's talking about economic equality, worker rights, right? We don't want the proletariat to take care of everything. I'm sorry, we want the proletariat to
Bourgeoisie
have the stuff, not the bougie people own everything, right?
Yeah.
And so there is this proletariat uprising that he would envision. And so when the left started to develop these Marxist ideas and people started to get enamored by it, this is in the 19th century, the right would really start pushing capitalistic ideals and nationalistic ideologies. That's why we have like the Christian right or Christian nationalists, that kind of idea emerging. But that started from the 19th century, from the 1800s. And it really is defending traditional values. That's why you have like trad wife, trad husband, trad guy, right? Like that trad movement. There's a name for it now, but it's been there from the 19th century. So you have the political left and right. This is again in the West, not necessarily in the East. But the political left and right start to develop more. By the time we get to the 20th century, we have places like in England, which pushed over to Canada and all of Europe, like labor movements. Social Democrats would be in the United States. Civil rights, that's the 20th century. Civil rights was big. Welfare, making sure everyone can eat. Social justice, those words came up, and that's on the left. On the right, you would have not just conservatives, but now you would have libertarians like just leave me alone, that kind of group. We want free markets, meaning I want government out of the markets as much as possible. And we want to preserve culture. There is a preservation of culture that's out there. So if you're trying to preserve your culture, you are probably more on the right in the 20th century. And so that's where we really saw in the 20th century the rise of Nazi fascism and Soviet communism come into the world and in strong force. Because as you started to develop these political ideologies, you started to see these extremes really come to light. And as a result, millions of people died. And so here we are in the 21st century. And now it has changed where the left is more about climate change, gender equality, pluralism.
Still social justice, though.
Social justice. I don't know if they really use words like that as much. I think they use equity. Social justice was really popular, like even up to 5 years ago. And now the right uses terms like populism, right? He got all the votes, right? Traditionalists, the right really uses that. And the right really focuses on free market. So, when we're talking about tariffs, for example, you look at the stock market and you judge based upon how the stock market is doing, you judge how the tariffs are going. That's like maybe 95% of how you see if tariffs are working or not. You look at the markets, right?
Yeah.
Usually that is a right talking point, not a left. Left will point to that, but then they'll really want you to abandon that in the end and then go to climate action or something like that. And so these lines are now starting to be blurred again in the 21st century, where you might have extremism, but not necessarily a right fascism or left communism, but some blurring of that because of all this misinformation that's out there. The talk of globalization. If you listen to like Doug Wilson, he'll talk about how the true threat is globalization now, politically speaking, right? You just want an anti-globalist guy. And so those are things that people are now picking up on. Does that make sense? So I try to give the context, if that's okay, from the 18th century to the 21st century.
Yeah.
This is stuff that I like talking about, obviously, because you listen to me talk about it on a weekly basis in the office staff meetings.
Yeah. No, I think that's helpful for us to know where these terms even come from. And I guess kind of like the history of the left or the right or the conservative or the liberal. I think that's helpful for us because a lot of us today, we just know what the media is feeding us today in terms of, oh, these are the conservatives or these are the liberals. You see those people protesting. Those are like, that's what we see on the news. And so it's helpful to know, I think, the background and the context of it.
Yeah, I think ultimately you want to look at the telos of, let's say, a movement. Where do they want you to end up? So climate change, where do they really want you to end up? They say, we want the earth to be preserved. That's what they're purporting to be their goal. What about the critics? What do they say climate change advocates really want us to end up? In a totalitarian government, right? We want more government control. Mm-hmm. And so you listen to where the party that's advocating something that they say they want to go to this place, and then you listen to the critics. And then you look at, the right. We want free market. We want all this. Why? Because we want, individual freedom. That's what we want to focus on. Individual freedom. They'll say all that. Well, what do the critics say? They really want totalitarian control. So both critics are always going after, each side wants totalitarian control. Or they'll use words like oligarchy, things like that. It's an oligarchy, like Bernie Sanders has been like just harping on this for 40 years or whatever, oligarchy. And now he finally gets to do it, and people are picking it up after 40 years. Oh, it's oligarchy. But, he's been saying this for decades, that it's oligarchy, even when Democrats were in control. And now that Trump's in, the people that are anti-Trump will pick up on that, I guess, for, whatever benefits their political agenda. But these are things that we want to just keep in mind, just be mindful of, and it helps you put things into context, maybe help understand where we are.
So where are we? Where do we fit in?
Yeah. And so I do think that, like you said, it's very important to know our current context, but maybe more so our universal context. Yeah. So when we talk about biblical context, we're talking about what is the universal moral order and law that God has given us, and how does that then shape up in understanding our political landscape. A lot of people try to view the Bible through their political lens, which is wrong. I think it's backwards. So I'll just give a little criticism of the left and right here. The left will understand the Bible through its leftist political lens and saying, look at what the Bible says is going against our agenda. The right will try to understand the Bible through their political lens. So look at the Bible, it's all for tradition. Actually, not necessarily. It's all for order. And if tradition goes against that order, the Bible will speak vehemently against it. Take, for example, the tradition of Canaan was Baal worship, was Asherah pole worship, was Molech worship. The Bible hated that, so it upturned their tradition, and God would bring in moral order. So if a tradition is going up against the moral order, there needs to be reform. Again, the word is kind of loaded if we say the word reform, because we say Reformed Christians, but if you're a Reformed Jew, that's a denomination. A Reformed Jew, then they're very liberal. But Reformed Protestants also is kind of loaded too, because Reform in the PCUSA will mean something else that's different from Reform in the PCA.
Right.
So even the PCUSA versus the PCA would use the word reform very differently, or they would have different meanings to the word reform.
I mean, you see Reformed churches on signs all the time. It doesn't necessarily mean that they hold to Reformed traditions.
When they say reform, they're saying they're reforming from the current cultural norms, which are, they think, bad. They're using the word reform in the leftist French Revolution way, because the left in the French Revolution used the word reform. They wanted to reform. They wanted to reform away from traditional values. They didn't like traditional values. They wanted to start a 10-day work week. Why do we have a 7-day work week? It's crazy. They wanted to start a 10-day calendar week, and obviously it didn't last long.
Yeah.
They wanted to get rid of all religious institutions because they were reforming away. So when you use the word reform, you have to understand the context of what reform is or where it's from.
I don't have any like follow up. Just like listening.
Okay. Well, when you talk about conservatism now, not conservativism, we were corrected by Sam. Conservatism is what we believe now, currently in 2025, what the Republican Party is associated with or what they espouse, right? And you might not know it. You might just know what the leftist party or the Democratic Party really espouses. But conservatism is mainly about individual freedom. That's like their primary. That's like the, I shouldn't say there. That's like the primary core principle of conservatism in 2025. You don't want the government to impede on your freedom.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So that's what conservatism is really about, which means limited government, which means rule of law, which means all these things, right? Which is like where we get like fiscal responsibility. We want less spending because more spending equals bigger government. And free markets. We want government out of the markets. I don't want the government telling me what to do with my business or to tax me on it when I'm barely making ends meet. And so those are all these things that will show up. But because that's the core principle, there are things that align with the biblical standards that we know as Reformed Christians, meaning Reformed according to the Word of God Christians. And there are things that don't align. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So I would say of all the principles outlined from the Republican Party in the United States, I don't know, some people listen to this podcast outside of the States, and what the Democratic Party has been, really standing on, even though they might not have a website saying these are the Democrat values, but have been lining up on, this is where Virgil Walker will say the Christian cannot be part of the Democratic Party right now.
But that can change though, right? Because that's not like a statement of a Christian can never be Democrat.
As we're speaking, Democrats have stopped talking about abortion rights. It just disappeared.
It did. Yeah.
It literally disappeared from the political conversation.
Yep.
They, for some reason, have found out that this is not a winning topic.
No.
Now we know, like, mifepristone literally kills people, the abortion drug. Mm-hmm. Now we have data that people have been hiding where they said, severe adverse cases are like 0.5%. It's very low. Now we know that's completely untrue. Studies are showing that it's 22 times higher. It's 11%. So more than 1 out of 10 chances, if you take mifepristone, something seriously bad will happen to you. That's a crazy statistic, right?
Yeah.
It used to be 0.5%, so people would take these abortion pills and be like, the chances are low, something like that. But all these things are happening. And that's even when people aren't reporting it. So if you went back to Planned Parenthood, they wouldn't report that junk. And so now people are finding stuff out like in a really, really bad way. I forget where I was going with this or where I was coming
Democrats
from.
today versus...
Oh, yeah. Can you be a Democrat? So, with their stance on abortion, now they're not even talking about it. Now it's more like we need to fight the oligarchy. We need to fight fascism. We need to fight the totalitarianism that Donald Trump is trying to bring. So you'll see a lot of Democrats have that as a talking point. But yeah, I'm in agreement with Virgil Walker here because you cannot support the Democrat Party when they are so pro-abortion, where they have no limitations at all on abortion. That everyone, it's part of your autonomous rights, which is kind of like very similar to the extreme right, because the extreme right won't really care about abortion either, because they just care about autonomy, right? Extreme right, not even if you're very severely right, you will be pro-life to a degree, that kind of thing. Maybe you won't put moms in jail for killing their baby, but maybe you just want to put the abortion doctors who kill the babies in jail or something like that.
So when we look at the political landscape, then it's not so much that Christians are liberal versus conservative, Democrat versus Republican, but it's whatever party, I guess, and whatever view is most aligned with the Bible, that is what we go with, right? So, for example, it may have been a quote unquote liberal thing. It may be a liberal thing, let's say, in a Muslim country to desire freedom of religion, let's say, something like that, right? Then the Christian in that context would be liberal. So it's not so much that we're stuck to these labels, but it's so that we stick to what the Word says, and we align with, I guess, the viewpoint that most aligns with what the Word says. Is that kind of a good way of thinking about it?
Yeah, let's go to our Reformed doctrine of, faith, let's say, and let's put that in line with the individual freedom that our political party on the right is saying, and let's put that together, okay? So, it's a good podcast, I think, for me, because a lot of people are like, oh, you guys are just Republican.
Yeah.
And you can't be like, no, we're
MAGA.
not, And so where do we differ? Potentially. So where do we align? Potentially. So there's partial agreement in that there is individual freedom, meaning you can't force someone to accept a faith. There's freedom in there, right? And so when you are saying on the left that everyone needs to bow down to the climate god of, we say no, that's not something. But everyone has to, because otherwise Mother Gaia will be upset and she'll destroy us with like stronger hurricanes every year. I don't know. And so that's literally what they're saying. And so maybe they don't use the word Mother Gaia all the time, but they're like, oh, the hurricanes are getting worse, And you're like, no, they're not. The sea levels are rising. It's like, oh, no, it's not, but it will, And so there's been this back and forth, but because we're talking about the right, let me stay there. Because of that, it can go to autonomy. And I briefly touched on this before, but human autonomy is where we can kind of see partial agreement. We do have personal, and this is what I mean by autonomy. We have personal agency and responsibility when it comes to religion. That means I can't force you. There shouldn't be government punishment if you belong to a certain religion. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if you don't join this religious group, I will impose taxes, or there'll be some kind of punishment.
Yeah.
This is not what we believe. So there should be individual freedom, and this is why the Puritans came over. This is what our whole country is based off on. I believe that's excellent. I would say keep that. There should be religious freedom all the way. And you can say, oh, it's not religion, it's science. No. If you say science, TM, you're saying religion.
TM.
Yeah. And so the way we believe, I believe, aligns with that notion of freedom and moral agency, personal agency that every human has. The tensions, of course, is what I alluded to, is that civil liberty is not ultimate.
Yep.
It is secondary to societal and spiritual responsibility, meaning obedience to the Word of God. And so for the believer, obedience to the Word of God is not optional. It's not up to you whether you obey the Word of God or not. It's absolutely mandatory. And so we are not antinomian. We don't have unfettered freedom, meaning we don't have freedom to sin or believe that sin is okay. And so those things should be really, really obvious, but we are fettered to biblical morality, to what is good, true, and beautiful according to the Word of God. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that this is against what the right is saying with individual freedom. But obviously, what I said was people can be on the right and not believe what I just said about obedience to the word of God. Yes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the difference between, I guess, classical cultural conservatism and the Christian is that whereas the secular conservative relies on and clings to traditions and
Nothing. Honestly, it's nothing. They're autonomous. And because I think that's where it just doesn't make, it's just not consistent, right? Because you could say tradition, but tradition came from somewhere. This is where, Richard Dawkins, he's like, oh, I like the Christianity of the 20th century. Even though I'm not a Christian, I want to be ruled by that kind of Christian. Remember he said that, Richard Dawkins recently?
Yeah.
Yeah. You say that you belong, you want that tradition, but it's fettered to something, right? This is where I don't think it stands unnecessarily. But you can't say autonomous, meaning independent from God. When we say we have freedom, we have this autonomy. We're talking about autonomy from the government. That's what we're talking about, but not autonomous entirely. So the Christian believes that we should have some autonomy from the government, but we are not autonomous from God.
No.
We are completely dependent on God. God is the ultimate authority, and his authority branches over all of our life, every single aspect of our life. The government does not. And this is where we differ from, let's say, someone who's on the right who believes that we are autonomous completely. We're completely autonomous individuals. That's why I'm saying that if you have an abortion, let's say, in the privacy of your own home, someone who is on the extreme right, like a secular conservative, might not have a problem with that. Might not. And I know people that don't. Although I would say that would actually go against, it would contradict your ultimate understanding of individual freedom, because that
The
the baby's
autonomy.
individual freedom
Yeah.
is dead. Yeah.
Wait, so I think I'm a little confused. So what we're saying is that when we look at the foundation, the founding of conservatism, or just like the beginnings of it, it was reliant on tradition and it was reliant on institutions that were already set. However, now in 2025, we're saying that it has moved from that kind of view into just seeking autonomy from the government.
Yeah.
Whereas the progressive movement or the liberal movement has gone the other way, where it's now just it's all about government control.
Yeah, because they need a God, and because there is no, spiritual God that they believe in. It needs to be a material God, and the material God can only be government. That's why globalism is a real thing still today. And if you are a secularist, you don't have any problem with globalism, because you need government in every tier of your life. You need government in your family tier because you don't know how to parent. You need the government to tell you what to do. You need your government in your community level. You need government in your city level, your state level, national level, and global level. And so, if you're truly a leftist, you believe government should be there in every tier of your life because God is, your God is government.
So I think the confusing part for some people might be when we talk about our faith. Let's just say in the workplace, we talk about our faith, us being Christian. We could automatically be seen as conservative because we have a religious background, right?
Yeah.
Or we can say, "Oh, I'm conservative." Should we not be saying that? Because if conservative really means autonomy and you yourself being God versus liberal and progressive being the government being God, should we just not say that we're conservative then?
No, I think we are conservative because we are conserving, ideals that are biblical, that have been traditional, that has made the nation that way it is now. So I think conservative is the right term to use. And I think that the Conservative Party, meaning the Republicans, that umbrella houses us too.
Right.
Whereas you couldn't have these ideals and be part of the Democratic Party.
I see. But what you're saying is we would fall under that umbrella. However, the main I guess, goal, you could say the telos of the Conservative Party is autonomy. However, we are still under that umbrella because their political agendas and ideologies align with what we believe as Christians.
It's I would say, if I were to use the phrase again, it's limited. It's limited because, it wants limited government, so it's limited in the autonomy that they understand, because it doesn't necessarily point to the I am God, Jesus Christ, right?
So
if the government actually pointed to Jesus Christ, then government would fully understand its role. If they did, right? Not perfectly, but it would understand it to the degree that's necessary. But when government doesn't say we are a government that is ruled by Christ, then what is its limiting factor? The limiting factor is, let's say, the Constitution, which is not bad. It's great. The other branches of government, they keep the checks and balances that we understand.
Yeah.
And so that's where we would say that government isn't necessarily Christian. It's not. We don't have a government church like UK does.
Or China.
We don't have a government church like, Rome. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so that they wanted to keep that away because, again, this is why tensions are there. The tension is there because we want to hold on to some sort of autonomy from the government, but not autonomy from God.
Yeah, I see.
So that's where the tension is there.
I see. I mean, the reason why I ask this is because I think when Christians say, "Oh, I'm conservative," they're like, we don't know where our boundary is. And so, for example, let's just say you voted Republican this past election cycle, and you see yourself as a conservative Republican. I think oftentimes Christians don't know where that ends.
Yeah, and this is all to say that it's good to know the limitations of the party that you're, associated with, but it's also good to really be happy for it. Like, I'm so happy that we have a Republican in the White House and not a leftist lunatic.
But
like
then what
Kamala Harris was.
But what if someone was like, "But you're a Christian, though. So how can a Christian be so happy with a secular ruler? Like you're so
I am so
gung-ho about
happy
it."
considering the alternative. This is why the leftists also adopt this very same principle, and they are so happy as long as it's not Donald Trump.
Right. Yeah.
It's the exact same thing, except flipped around. We're so happy. So the leftists can't accuse us of anything when they're doing the exact same thing.
Yeah.
I don't want some crazy lunatic leftist become seated at the White House. I just don't. And so look, and I said this, I implied this. I alluded to it, I should say.
Illusions.
Yeah. I will take, who's the crazy driver again?
Jehu.
I will take a Jehu. Right. I will take a Jehu, son of Nimshi. I will take a Jehu, son of Nimshi over Ahab any day.
I mean,
any day.
Yeah.
And you're like, how can you be happy for Jehu? He's a crazy guy. Yeah, he's a crazy guy. He's gonna disturb a lot of things.
Crazy driver.
Yeah, he will. And he's a crazy driver.
Like a madman.
He's a madman. He drives like a madman because he's probably acting like a madman. You can tell what kind of person someone is by the way they drive.
That's
right?
true.
If you drive like an old man and your face is right on that steering wheel, I could kind of tell you are a risk averse person.
Oh, you're a careful rule follower.
Yeah. Anyway, but if you're like Jehu, you could tell
do whatever.
He's kind of crazy. Yeah. Would I take a Jehu over Ahab any day, bro? But if I had to pick a Josiah or a Jehu, obviously I pick Josiah.
Right.
So people are like, how dare you be happy for a Jehu? Considering that Ahab was on the other side of the ticket, I'm ecstatic Jehu has been chosen.
But
ecstatic, bro.
So I think people might think, well, there's a difference between being happy that someone that is, I guess, not as crazy was elected in, but then going so far into this person, being a fan of this person, isn't that kind of not a Christian thing?
Depends. Are you one of Jehu's followers? Are you one of his men? Then you should put your cloak down and have him walk over it when he walks down the steps. Because that happened, right?
Yeah.
And so if you are, then you should. Are you one of his subjects because he is king? Oh, yeah. Follow Jehu. Pray for him. If you're one of his advisors, can you advise him on some of the good stuff that he should do? Absolutely. Everybody has a role to play. Being excited or not excited, I don't know, for me is like maybe even tertiary. I'm saying you have a role to play now, and your role is to say, oh, this is good, this is bad. For us, we want to say the Bible is calling balls and strikes on what Trump is doing, and that we could say, this is not me judging. This is not what I personally think what Trump is doing. And if it is, I will say, personally, I feel this way. But we really want to get into the balls and strikes that the Bible is calling. And so even when we talked about Biden, we didn't call balls and strikes according to what we felt was good. This is not how I feel. This is what the Bible has said. You cannot kill babies. You can't be pro-abortion, bro. You got to get off that ramp, man. This is terrible when the country is following you along to its death. But, going back to the whole Jehu Ahab comparison, I couldn't resonate with that comparison more with our 2020 election. Is it 2024 election? I couldn't resonate with this comparison more. I do believe it was between Ahab, maybe even Ahab's wife Jezebel versus Jehu, and one day we could pray that Josiah will come up and God will have mercy and Josiah will rule. But at the same time, I think what's more important is that Jesus is ruler. Yeah. Jesus is ruler. Jesus is king. I don't wait for Josiah because Jesus has already come. I follow Jesus. And the ruler, I want to follow Jesus. And so if someone is a Jesus follower and he really loves the Lord and knows his law, follows the law, and is wise according to those ways, then that would make me truly ecstatic. Dude, we would have a party. We would literally have a podcast party where you would have confetti.
What if the dude was like a Roman Catholic, though?
Maybe confetti ice cream.
How does that work? I thought
Roman Catholic. We had Roman Catholics. We had JFK and we had Joe Biden.
What about JD?
JD is not president.
I know, but I'm saying for the future. But I think so. My question also is, I think in this past election cycle, it was very. I don't want to say easy, but it was pretty clear which side was more aligned to the Bible and which side was not. In the future, right, as we continue, because we know that earthly rulers come and go. In the future, as we continue to think about, it almost becomes like an identity thing. Like, oh, I'm a conservative, therefore I must align with X, Y, and Z of the conservative party. Like, I feel like it becomes like an identity thing. Party
loyalty is there. It's real.
So in the future, how are we to think about politics as a Christian? Like, what kind of view do we have? What worldview are we supposed to look through? How do we discern things, whether this is of God and whether it's not? And where do we make compromises? So for example, like you said, with the Republican Party, we don't agree with every single thing that they do. Not 100%.
Not 100%.
No. Yeah. So where do we know how to make the compromises? Where do we know how to make the discernment?
Yeah. And so, I don't think we should be people completely against social work. We do enjoy social work. I think it's part of, the Christian's duty to help the community. But we don't align with social justice premises, right? We don't align with that.
Right.
And so we just have to be wise in how we act and how we do. If you go, where exactly, dude, it depends. What are we talking about here? What are we talking about? Are we talking about social programs? But I would say our number one priority is don't mess with our religion. Don't mess with how we worship God. Number one priority. Number two, because, I think that was the ultimate reason why the Egyptians were crushed, because let them worship Yahweh. And Pharaoh was like, nah. That was the ultimate thing, right? Wasn't it? And number two is don't mess with the family. Yeah, don't mess with the family. And so let us raise our kids. Let us teach them the biblical precepts that we want to teach them. Don't impede on that. And if we say LGBTQ is not the way, don't mess with that, because that's what we want to teach our kids. Don't be saying, oh, you don't get to teach them that because LGBTQ is the way. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I would say those two things are what really aligns us with the conservative party.
What traps do you see Christians falling into?
Well, that's a good question. I guess populism is big. To hold Trump to maybe an ideal, an idol, I should say.
Right.
I don't think Christians necessarily do. I think
I don't think so either.
I think that's
No.
like a very false.
It's like a narrative that liberals, I think, play.
Yeah, I just don't. I don't see it. I think there is Trump worship by some, but I don't think it's popular. Even if you had a picture of Trump in your office or you wore Trump paraphernalia, I don't think it's Trump worship. Honestly, I just like if you bow down to him, that's one thing. If you think he's the savior of all our issues, I would say that's probably misguided.
Yeah.
But to understand where you are. And then to say, well, some dangers are inherent in every single political, side. That I think that's true. So even of the right, that will be true too, right? So, political worship, that will be wrong. And I guess Christian nationalism, to the effect where what you really mean is white nationalism.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I mean, that's a criticism of the left, but let's take it to the extreme. So I've heard this from some people, which made me a little sad. They were conservative, and they said, we need to go back to traditional values. We need to conserve these cultural values that we had in the West. Agree or disagree?
Okay, yeah.
You agree, yeah?
Yes, as long as
What?
it also aligns with the Bible.
Right. And so it does.
Right.
We should go back to trad wives and trad husbands. Yes?
What is trad again?
Traditional.
Yeah, sorry.
Right?
Yes.
Okay. So you agree with that. So mixing of cultures is bad.
No.
That's what they will say.
Because
when you mix culture, you lose
Right.
that traditional bond you have.
So no more melting pot.
So no interracial marriages. That's what they'll end up. Because when you marry interracially, you are mixing the two cultures. You can't hold to that culture. Secondly, you could say like white people have an inherent beauty. There's this beauty about white people, and you lose that when you intermarry. They become some kind of mix.
Right.
Or Asians could say the same. Asians have been saying the same thing. Like,
Yeah. Wait, but you could still want to go back to traditions and hold on to trad wife and trad husband at the same time.
And we got to go back to what Darrell Harrison said
Right.
about the difference between race and ethnos, ethnicity, and you mean nation, meaning where you're from, and color of your skin. And melanin has nothing to do with anything, but we have now really solidified. So if you have this sort of melanin, you must have this culture. Otherwise, you are a traitor to your culture. So if your culture with a certain level of melanin means you're a liar, then everyone must be a liar. And then if you're not a liar, then you're a traitor to this cultural or this racial category that you have set up. I'm going by the whole all Cretans are liars, right?
Yeah.
And so if you're saying because of some sort of melanin level, you must adhere to a certain culture, but that culture is antithetical to the Bible, you must reject that. You must reject that. If you're saying, as a culture, we have something, then that's not bad, in my opinion. Does that make sense? Can I give you one that might be a little bit sensitive? And so East Asians, they don't wear deodorant as culture. They don't wear deodorant.
Wait, what? Wait, what? What are you talking about? Wait.
That's a real thing.
They don't wear deodorant.
Southeast Asians don't wear deodorant. In America, it might be different. I'm talking about Southeast Asians.
Southeast.
Yeah, like Koreans. When you say Southeast Asian, you're always talking about Korea, Japan, and China.
Oh, okay. They're talking about like Vietnam.
We're not talking about Vietnam or the Philippines.
Okay.
We're talking about Koreans, Japanese, and China. That's what I'm talking about, at least.
When you say Southeast, okay.
Yeah, maybe some people mean Philippines. Do they mean the Philippines?
Yeah, because I think
Philippines?
East Asia is China, Japan, and Korea, but then Southeast is like Philippines, Myanmar.
South is India, I know.
We don't even consider them ours, though.
Because East Asia is like Kamchatka. That's Russia. Anyway.
It is Kamchatka, actually.
It is Kamchatka. Yeah. You know, Kamchatkans look like Koreans. They just speak Russian. It's kind of crazy.
And they're probably nasty wrestlers.
Yeah. It's like they have the best of both worlds. They look like Koreans, but they fight bears.
They drink goat milk.
And but anyway, getting back on topic. So I guess I meant East Asians then, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. East Asians, they don't necessarily wear deodorant.
I didn't know that, actually.
Yeah, because they don't really smell because they don't sweat. I think 90% or more genetically don't have like wet earwax. It's dry earwax.
I've heard about this theory.
This is true.
Yeah.
I don't know who the 10% are, but gross.
There's people. No, there's people.
They're like, hey, I'm part of the 10%. But keep this in. Gross. Yeah, and so like they don't necessarily have BO because they shower every day and they don't sweat that much that they'll smell. Some people do, so they'll put on deodorant, for etiquette, because they don't want to smell too much. But
I didn't know that.
If you wear in East Asia, if you wear too much deodorant, people will plug their nose.
Because as you sweat, it
No. If you wear deodorant, let's say you're riding in a subway in Korea or Japan.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is true in China, but this is true in Korea and Japan. If you're riding in a subway in Korea or Japan and you have deodorant on and it's strong, people will plug their nose because deodorant smell is not something that they're used to.
Right.
And so if you're wearing like Axe body spray, I don't know if people still use that
Old
stuff,
Spice.
but Axe body spray or Old Spice, be careful. If you are of non-Asian genetics and descent, non-East Asian, I should say, and you are in East Asia and you have BO, people will not like you. But if you overspray deodorant, people will not like you either. It is a lose-lose for you. Yeah. I mean, obviously, there even with genetics, it plays some part. I'm not saying that we're all exactly the same, right?
Yeah.
And so there is some differences, but not in the absolute sense where if the way we're taking it now, if you're black, you are this, and you must adhere to some cultural moral law. That's not how it works.
So it's really a question about what do you hold on to, right?
Yeah.
So it's do you hold on to? So for example, like, would you rather marry a non-Christian Korean or a Christian non-Korean? It's obviously the Christian non-Korean. It's what do you hold on to, or what is of priority to you?
Because we're coming from this extreme right Christian where they think we need to preserve culture. White people should only marry white people because eventually all the white people will disappear if we continue to do that, right? And so, that kind of thinking is a little sad. I think white people will continue to marry white people. There will be some mixing. Asian people will continue to marry Asian people. There will be some mixing. But it shouldn't be forced either way, because what's ultimate priority is, are you going to be in heaven?
Yeah, it's a faith thing.
It's a faith thing.
Not a melanin thing.
Yeah, so I think Daryl Harrison plays it really well, where he puts melanin on such a low bar. It's a nothing. Yeah. It's a nothing bar.
Yeah.
I think ultimately it should be so low on the bar that it should be like nothing when it comes to faith. That's how important faith is.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you're married, it's like, oh, I really don't like these kinds of people and I have this kind of preference. It's not necessarily wrong. No, I'm telling you, it's not necessarily. So if a Korean comes up to you and says, I kind of would marry a Korean because similar culture, language,
like I want
the way
them
I
to
grew
speak
up,
Korean to my parents,
blah, blah, blah. It's not necessarily wrong, but if you place that on top of faith, then you are absolutely wrong.
Right, that's not an
But if a white person does that, I'm saying that's not necessarily wrong either. But if you're saying that a white person must do that to preserve culture, I would say that's a little sad.
I think that's very, very helpful, Pastor Eugene. I think as we continue to think about our identity as Christians, I think there are labels that are put on us. Like we talked about, oftentimes if you say you're Christian, people automatically assume, oh, you must be a conservative politically, or you must be this, you must be that. But I think it's a good reminder that we are Christians first and foremost, and that is what we cling to the most is God's law, it's God's word, and that's how we identify ourselves. Q&A for this Monday morning. This is an interesting one. Do AI depictions of Jesus mock God? And so here is the context. First, we have Exodus 20, verse 4. And it reads, "You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers and the children to the third and the fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing steadfast love to thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments." So that's the second commandment. The context was, there's a video that this individual sent of, it's an AI generated video of Pope Francis in heaven hanging out and flying in the clouds with Jesus. It's interesting. And I think that brings to question, not even AI depictions, but do all depictions of Jesus mock God? And are there any circumstances where it does not? Because I've heard arguments for children's books. I've heard arguments for people saying it's okay for children's books, having a picture of Jesus because it's teaching something. Whereas obviously having a statue of Jesus in a Roman cathedral is wrong because you are literally bowing to it. So I guess, is it wrong? Is it mocking God? And is there ever a case where a second commandment violation is actually not a second commandment violation?
I think you have some strong feelings on this. I think you should weigh in.
No.
You and Brian have these very strong 2CV, maybe Junseok too. Second commandment violation, like.
So it's almost
wait.
It's also like the nativity scene.
Yeah. You don't do it, or you just keep the baby out of it.
Well, I don't even do it in general, just because I don't really
celebrate Christmas.
No,
you want me to finish your sentences? I'll do it.
Please don't. I'm just saying, I just don't have one. I don't have one in the house. If someone got it for me, though, I probably wouldn't put it up.
The whole scene, or just with the baby?
Well, I don't want there to be an empty manger. So I guess, yeah. Do AI depictions mock God? It does?
No, I'm asking you. Weigh in, brother.
I think absolutely. That's what I think. It's tough. I saw the video. It's terrible. First of all, Jesus in that AI depiction is bearded, as many depictions are. Yeah, but he's very, very white, very light skinned. He has a sash on and he's flying through the clouds like with Pope Francis. I don't think that is what's happening right now in reality. I'm not saying where Pope Francis is, but I'm just saying you're not flying around the skies with Jesus when you go to heaven. That's not what happens. And so I think the moment you start saying, hey, this is Jesus, or this is what Jesus looks like, even if it's AI, you're taking, even if it's slight, attention away, glory away, honor away from the Son of God, who is actually at the right hand of God. And so I think any depiction of Christ in a book, whatever it may be, is
media
is 2CV.
Graphe.
Although I did watch Passion of the Christ and I cried.
Wasn't Passion of the Christ 2CV though?
I wasn't like that back then.
Are you not going to watch Passion of the Christ Part 2?
How can there be a Part 2? That's what I don't understand. What is...
It's in filming.
Yes, I don't know what they're filming. What could they be possibly filming?
I think post-resurrection, pre-ascension.
Oh.
I don't know. I'm guessing. Because the movie
material is
ended
limited.
with resurrection. Boom, it ended.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I won't be watching that film. Yeah.
What if they take that?
I mean, I'm not gonna give him a chance.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought he was Jewish. No, he doesn't
Mel
like
Gibson
Jewish.
is Roman Catholic.
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, AI depictions, non-AI depictions, just depictions in general of Jesus mock God. Violation of the second commandment. That is just my view on the matter.
Yeah, I know. You and Brian. Just respectable.
So if you notice during Palm Sunday, our children's ministry coloring sheets do not have Jesus in them.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a donkey it's just a donkey. It's interesting. R.C. Sproul's books also do not have a depiction of Jesus, but it's just the donkey. And then you see like a hand or something like that.
But that's a depiction.
Take it up with Ligonier. That's not my field of... Yeah, but it's interesting.
Okay. Let's go to context, and then we'll go to classic Reform tradition interpretation. Context is, this is about worship. You shall not worship.
Yes.
And so people say that as long as the image is not worshipped.
Right, because
it's
bow
not
down
a
and
2CV.
serve them. Right.
2CV is about worship, right? And so as long as you're not bowing down in worship to the image, but you shall not make any image, depicting a spiritual Godhead, meaning the divine essence, because you can't make a physical image of the divine essence.
No, you can't.
So you would take away again the fullness of the glory which it would have had, the full kavod, right?
Yeah.
And so you can't do that. So you can't draw an image of the divine essence. You can't draw any image and worship it, especially if you think that's God. So that's the context. Well, yes. I think everybody agrees.
Yep.
I think where people differ is, and I'll go to even the more extreme case where you are. No, there's a more extreme version of that where you can't have any imagery in the worship setting, period.
Oh, right.
So if there's any imagery in the worship setting, then that is a 2CV, because you're in worship and there's an image. We don't do that, obviously.
But we don't have any images in our church.
We don't, but we have like backgrounds on the screen. That I'm not a big fan of personally. I mean, no one knew this until this very moment. But I'm not a big fan of the images in the background. But I get it. It's like boring just to look at a black background.
You don't like traveling.
What are we in 1980? Yeah. What are we in 1980? We're in 2025. We want to travel through time and space as we're seeing this worship lyrics, and the stars are like zooming at you, like going at light speed. Like holy moly! And so. Look, I don't mind it that much. I had to say something, but I'm not a big fan. And so obviously there are images in worship that we've had, right?
Like a cross would be an image.
No, like the Ark of the Covenant. That's all image. Like the cherubim. That's image, right? And the carpenter, the craftsman, was fastened or fitted with the Holy Spirit to be able to do all that, right? Mm-hmm. And so, I don't think any imagery is prohibited. And now we get to Jesus. Is any image or depiction of the second person in the Trinity in his human form, not his resurrected form, in his human form while he was here on earth, prohibited? I get it, the AI image is his resurrected form. You probably don't want to go to that line. So are we drawing lines between Jesus' human nature and divine nature? And I get it that these are all like, wow, these are discussions that you could have. I myself, I'm not that offended when I see Passion of the Christ, because I know that actor is not Jesus Christ. I just know it.
Yeah.
And that's not what Christ looks like. He looks much better. But while he was on this earth, Isaiah does say there's nothing about him that would have brought us to our attention to him.
Very common looking.
Yeah, he's just a normal dude.
Yeah. Carpenter, though.
Paraphrasing, yeah. He's just a normal dude.
Nice forearms.
He might have been physically fit. We don't know.
Carpenter, yeah.
We don't know. We don't know. Maybe just forearms.
Yeah.
Like ripped forearms.
There's no way that he didn't, yeah.
I mean, if he did carpentry.
Because carpenter is like,
Yeah. What if he just put things together with like the waving of his hand? I don't know.
Oh no.
Anyway, we don't know. And the point is, if you want to draw an image that is not to be worshipped, that depicts Jesus while he was here on this earth, for instance, like, wow, his name is escaping me.
Leonardo da Vinci.
No, the other dude.
The guy stealing guy. Michelangelo.
No, not Michelangelo. Rembrandt.
Rembrandt.
Thank you. Like Rembrandt. I can't believe the name escaped me. Like Rembrandt.
Yeah.
Rembrandt had depictions of Jesus. Although
He's the hands guy, right?
Yeah, although those depictions are like kind of in the shade and kind of fuzzy, right?
Yeah.
I thought that was brilliantly done because you're not really focused, because that was Peter's denial. He drew Peter's denial.
Yeah.
And so the focus was on Peter. And then you could see Jesus is in the picture because Peter is denying Jesus and Jesus is looking at Peter. So he needed to draw Jesus looking at Peter without drawing distinct facial features. I thought that was brilliant. Anyway,
Yeah.
is that depiction going against 2CV? And so those are all debates that you could have. In the end, if you are a part of a denomination that strictly prohibits or allows for, I would say, go with what the denomination goes. There's a reason why they did it.
Yeah.
But if you're asking me personally what I feel, I'm not offended by it. I'm not going to worship it. If I see people tending toward worship, I will pull it, right? I will pull it. But if there is no fear of that, if there's no concern over that, I'm not too concerned over it either.
But I guess my question is it a sin?
Is it a sin to do AI depictions of Jesus?
Yeah.
It probably isn't the wisest thing. And it could be depending on your motive and your heart. But, even if your motive is good and your intent is good, it can still be a sin.
It felt silly.
Yeah, why are you putting Jesus in a silly place, like putting him in AI?
And Pope Francis, they're literally flying around the clouds. They're literally smiling, looking at each other and flying around the clouds.
Yeah, I think that's just maybe unwise, and I think silly is the proper term.
Yeah.
It's silly.
Tomfoolery. Shenanigans.
Yeah, but if it's part of creation, depictions are allowed. We should say that. Depictions are allowed. They are not to be worshipped.
Yes, for
because
creation.
It is creation.
Like if I made a statue of a dog or something because I love
totally
dogs.
Fine.
Yeah.
And is Jesus' body part of creation?
Right? But it's Jesus though. It's not Toto.
But it's Jesus. Right. And so Rembrandt, it's pretty good. You got to give it to him. The dude was brilliant.
The fuzzy thing is cool.
In the shade.
Yeah, the cool shade.
And what
fuzzy.
it does? It makes you actually take sometimes. You could look at Peter. Peter is brightly lit because of the fire that he was in front of, warming his hands. It makes you really try to look at Jesus, which is spiritually pretty good. Pretty good.
So it is an unwise thing.
I don't know if I could broadly say it's a sin, but maybe there could be cases where you need to make an AI depiction of Jesus. I don't know. Maybe.
If someone was like, I'll believe in Jesus if you make an AI depiction of Jesus.
You know what's funny is because of Michelangelo's depiction of Jesus, everyone has this universal image of Jesus, which they never had before.
Right.
And when people dream dreams, they dream of this image of Jesus, which is fascinating to me. And there's a story, look, I don't know if it's true, I wasn't there, but there's a story of a village that had been untouched by larger society. And there was this little girl who had a dream of Jesus. Eventually, missionaries came. They talked to them about Jesus. They had no idea. But they saw a painting of Jesus that they had, or a picture of Jesus. And the little girl's like, that's the man that kept on coming into my dreams. The painting of Jesus. That's the man that kept on coming. So the whole village believed. So I heard the story. Look, as for the truthfulness of this story, I cannot attest to. But I heard the story, and it could be true. I don't see why it can't be true. If it's true, then I would say God's grace is truly astounding. That's how I would probably interpret it.
I agree with that.
God's grace is truly astounding.
Yeah.
When I hear of healings, even though, we do believe that the gift of healing has ceased.
Yes.
Healing still occur.
Yes.
So people have this misguided notion of what cessationism is. Healing still occur.
Oh, yeah.
We pray for healing. The gift of healing, as we know it, as the apostles had it, that has ceased.
Like where you're like a
The
healer.
sign gifts,
Yeah,
right?
right,
that
right,
prove what you have said is true. That has ceased. Tongue, same thing. So when I hear of instances when people are talking and they heard it in their own language and
Bonjour.
you're declaring the glory of God,
Yeah.
I don't have any reason to deny that or to disbelieve that.
Yep.
That can happen because God is so incredibly gracious. But the sign gifts of tongue, as we knew in the New Testament, have ceased. That makes sense.
And also,
so
it's not
people
shallow.
have this. People have this really, really straw man version of cessationism that they try to shoehorn us into. That's not true. That's not what we believe.
Yeah.
So tongues can happen.
Yep.
Healing can happen.
Yep.
And prophecy, this is more fun. But it can be. Look.
Prophecy is.
But prophecy not in the sense where we saw in the New Testament.
In lowercase p.
So, look, I don't talk about it because people get confused. But I have told you about dreams that I've had before the thing came true.
Yep.
Do I have to? I never said I have the gift of prophecy. Never. And people always go, you do have the gift of prophecy. I'll say, no. Because the gift of prophecy, as we understand it, is in the New Testament. That's the sign gift. But can people have dreams that warn them or kind of prepare them for a certain thing that's going to come to the future? My answer is God is gracious. God is gracious. Going back to 2CV, God is gracious. And his grace is astounding. It's truly astounding. And so do I want to ever worship, knowing what we know now with the doctrines that we hold to be dear, do we worship any graven image or any depiction of Christ? Absolutely not. Does that offend me, however? It only offends me if people worship it. That's what offends me. But if people are drawing for historical accuracy or for teaching purposes, I don't have any problem with that, to be honest. But that's me. And if you have a problem with that, I kind of understand that as well. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
AI depictions, however, unwise in general. I will say that. I'm trying to answer that question. AI depictions are probably unwise in general.
Yeah. I really do like this topic, 2CV. Pastor Gene, we thank you for listening to this episode of the Dear Church podcast. Join us next week. We hope and pray that this has been a blessing in your ears. Fight the good fight, finish the race, keep the faith.
Peace.